Sithis, the Void, Akel, Sithsit, Sigi, Dreadfather. These are the names for the one being, one particularly elusive being. You've probably heard Sithis over and over. Praise Sithis, the Void this, the Void that, Sithis' children, all from the Dark Brotherhood questlines. But in our recent Cicero video, a few people were wondering who Sithis really is. I mean, everyone kind of gets that he is the Void, the deity of the Dark Brotherhood, but beyond that, the rest of his story isn't really thrown in your face. So that's why I'm here today. My name is Scott from Fudge Muppet, and today I will be answering who is Sithis. But upon writing this piece, I discovered that it is not that simple, and I will have to dip into the story of creation, as this is where Sithis is fundamental. So this video really is who is Sithis and the story of creation. So let's begin. Is this guy an evil god? I mean, a bunch of pretty damn evil people worship him. Sithis, in actual fact, transcends simple morality. He is a fundamental force, beyond Aedra and Daedra. But let's start at the very beginning. In the beginning, there were two forces, equal but opposite. The first was Anu, which was the force of order and stasis. The other was Padme, which was the force of chaos and change. These forces grind back and forth, warring and battling for dominance. However, none could prevail over the other due to the fact that they were both equal to one another. For how long they fought, it is impossible to know, because in this state prior to creation properly, time had not even been created. Anu and Padme were not even gods as you understand them. They were more like the personification of the fundamental forces. Consciousness, personality, will, and intent were not available to these forces. It was simply a force that does not change versus a force that does change. However, to get to the universe, the Orberus that we have today, something had to happen, and something did. Somehow, Anu birthed its own soul called Anoiel, to allow for self-reflection and better understanding of itself. Anoiel became the soul of all things. On the other hand, Padme did the same thing, created a soul for itself, and that soul, ladies and gentlemen, is Sithis. Sithis represented all the limitations of Anoiel. Before we go into exploring Sithis further with his Dark Brotherhood connection and his Argonian worship, I'm going to first go ahead and explain the rest of creation, so you can properly understand how Sithis fits into all of this, and you may be surprised. So now there exists two souls, Sithis and Anoiel. However, both Sithis and Anoiel are still not gods like you're familiar with. They are still abstract representations of everything and nothing, two fundamental cosmic states and forces. So the Orberus, the universe, is created by the interplay of these two forces. However, the universe was unstable and turbulent, so like their predecessors, they too would make themselves souls. Anoiel birthed the soul known as Auriel. Now this is a name you should be familiar with. Auriel created the concept of time, which stabilized the universe. Auriel is also known as Akatosh and Chief of the Divines, and Auriel is the elven name for the same god. However, there was a dragon break at some point, and that removed the elven aspects or separated the two beings, but that's another rabbit hole. Let's stay on track. All you need to know is Auriel created time. When Auriel created time and stabilized the universe, other beings that would become Aedra and Daedra came into existence. These beings collectively were called the Et'Ada, which means original spirits. Here, Aetherius and Oblivion are created. However, it isn't all peachy just yet, because Sithis, like Anoiel, creates himself a soul called Lorkhan. Now, Lorkhan you may be familiar with as the traitor god by the elves, or by his other names Shor or Shazar, as he is known by the races of men. Lorkhan is responsible for a lot of trouble and a lot of the events in the Elder Scrolls universe. So now you know that Sithis is kinda responsible for all of that in creating Lorkhan. So there were only two planes of existence at this point, known as Oblivion and Aetherius. So Lorkhan approached a bunch of the other Et'Ada and came up with the sick idea to create a new plane for themselves. He suggested to create Mundus, a mortal plane, to populate with their creations. Now, Anu and Padme are infinite cosmic forces and could create without consequence, but the Et'Ada like Lorkhan and Auriel, amongst the others, could not create without giving up pieces of their power. So Lorkhan knew about this, but didn't tell anyone, but a few of the gods caught on before it was too late. Magnus and the Magna-Gi bailed to Aetherius, creating the sun and the stars. The other gods were pissed AF when they lost a whole bunch of their power, so they created the Adamantine Tower and convened there to decide what punishment would be suitable for Lorkhan. As punishment, they wanted to remove Lorkhan's heart and destroy it, but apparently that would cause the destruction of Nirn. Disclaimer, this is the part where shit gets really tricky and hard to understand. There are quite a few different accounts of all this stuff, and some events happen before other events, but then don't make sense unless they happen after certain events. It gets very tricky, but the gist of it is, they didn't destroy the heart. Auriel took it and shot it with his bow into the sea, where Red Mountain would grow out of, making the island of Vvardenfell. That is why you find the heart of Lorkhan in the Red Mountain in Elder Scrolls III Morrowind. So what happened next? Well, the Et'arda didn't have enough divine power to go back to Aetherius. They could leave Nirn, however, so they became the 8 divines. These were Auriel/Akatosh, Arche, Dibella, Julianos, Kynareth, Mara, Stendarr, and Zenithar. And they basically chill out in space around Nirn as planets, using their limited power to influence events on Nirn. These are referred to as the Aedra. However, the Daedra are Et'arda who didn't want to help with creation at all, which is why they are more powerful, because they didn't have to give up a part of their power to create Mundus. The other Et'arda who wanted to keep on creating or did not have the power to leave stayed on Nirn. These were called the Elnafey, and when they ran out of power, they resorted to procreation, eventually becoming the groups of Men and Mer. So now you have a rundown on how Nirn and Mundus were created. Lorkhan is a T1 shitstirrer, and he was the soul that birthed from Sithis. So that gives a bit of insight into what kind of force Sithis is. But let's explore him further. Some say he's a representation of utter misanthropy. He is emptiness, the void. He is the nothing to everything's everything, if that makes any sense. How else can I explain him? Well, most lore can be found in books, especially in the Elder Scrolls games, so how about for a moment we defer to one of those, one in particular, titled Sithis. I'll read it first, but it gets a little spastic, so I'll break it down afterwards. Sithis is the start of the house. Before him was nothing, but the foolish Altmer have names for and revere this nothing. This is because they are lazy slaves. Indeed, from the sermons, stasis asks merely for itself, which is nothing. Sithis sauntered the nothing and mutated the parts, fashioning from a myriad of possibilities. These ideas ebbed and flowed and faded away, and this is how it should have been. One idea, however, became jealous and did not want to die. Like the stasis, he wanted to last. This was the demon Anoiel, who made friends, and they called themselves the Aedra. They enslaved everything that Sithis had made and created realms of everlasting imperfection. Thus are the Aedra the false gods, that is, illusion. So Sithis begat Lorkhan and sent him to destroy the universe. Lorkhan, unstable mutant. Lorkhan had found the Aedric weakness. While each rebel was, by their nature, immeasurable, they were, through jealousy and vanity, also separate from each other. They were also unwilling to go back to the nothing of before, so while they ruled their false dominions, Lorkhan filled the void with a myriad of new ideas. These ideas were legion. Soon it seemed that Lorkhan had a dominion of his own, with slaves and everlasting imperfections, and he seemed, for all the world, like an Aedra. Thus did he present himself as such to the demon Anoiel and the 8 givers, as a friend. Go unto the Sharmat Dagoth as a friend. A Herma Mora Altadun Padome Lorkhan AI. Essentially what this is saying is that Sithis created Lorkhan to eventually destroy the universe, to rid it of stability, returning it to the void, which is Sithis itself. As for what seems like gibberish at the end and references to Dagoth, we can explore those topics in another video, perhaps a whole video dedicated to Dagoth himself, but let's remain on task. Sithis is basically anti-existence, pro-nothing. We know this. So how does this play into his worship? Some believe that the mortal concept of Sithis began when a nihilistic Mephala-worshipping cult of Chima merged the concept of Padme with Daedric influences. This would fit in well with another cool theory. If the Morag Tong just worshipped Mephala like they did, but then a nihilistic cult within that organization developed the concept of Sithis, it could make sense that the Dark Brotherhood formed then as a splinter faction of the Morag Tong, and then they changed merged Mephala into the concept of the Night Mother, or something along those lines. Most cultures do not worship Sithis at all, mainly due to his association with death, and in fact, during the First and Second eras of history, there is hardly any mention at all until a cult known as the Dark Brotherhood emerged. They worship Sithis as the Void and Dreadfather. As well as this, they also worship the Night Mother. There were also a group of vampire assassins called the Crimson Scar who worshipped Sithis and challenged the Dark Brotherhood, but they failed and were dispersed. One of the only official religions and cultures that worship Sithis in any capacity is the Argonian religion. While they mainly worship the Histories, they credit Sithis as the original creator. The Argonians even had a unique relationship with the Dark Brotherhood, who of course is a Sithis assassin cult. Argonians born under the star sign of the Shadow were given to the Dark Brotherhood at birth so they could become specially trained assassins named Shadow Scales. Ochiva and Tinava were two that you may have met in Oblivion serving the Dark Brotherhood, or Vizara in Skyrim's Sanctuary. The last listener of the Dark Brotherhood, Alessandre Dupre, did attempt to reboot the Shadow Scale program, however they lacked the resources to do so. It is also interesting that by most of his worshippers, Sithis is seen as a skeletal being, an embodiment of death, a dread father, when in fact, he is shapeless, genderless, formless, he is nothingness, the void. He transcends death because death follows life. He is just simply nothingness. It would seem that the Dark Brotherhood's portrayal of Sithis is largely mythology and inaccurate in regards to the actual being. However, this is Elder Scrolls, and you never know. But here is how Sithis supposedly gave birth to the Dark Brotherhood. So Sithis visited a Dunmer woman, who he then impregnated, and this woman gave birth to 5 children. The Dunmer woman then claimed to hear the voice of Sithis in her head, telling her to kill her 5 children and send them to their father in the void. She went on to do this, and after she did, many angry citizens killed her and burnt down her house. According to the Dark Brotherhood legend, this was what created the Night Mother. 30 years after these events, a man began hearing voices in his head and followed those voices to the Night Mother's tomb. He became the first listener of the Dark Brotherhood. Their belief is that the Night Mother is married to Sithis, the Dreadfather, and the Dark Brotherhood are their metaphorical children. Anyways, the reason for pointing this out is to sort of highlight how the Dark Brotherhood knows Sithis as opposed to other cultures around the world. The reality is probably somewhere in the middle. I mean, if Sithis is opposed to creation and wants nothingness, killing and destroying people, i.e. part of creation, could be seen as appeasing to him, but then again, that requires creation, i.e. assassins to kill other creations, which often sends them to an afterlife anyway, which is also creation. Unless being killed by a Dark Brotherhood member actually does just fast-track you to the void. I guess we'll never know, but I would be inclined to think that Sithis is something a bit more than just an evil god of death or a dread father. In my head at least, I'm far more inclined to believe that he is just the void and nothingness, wanting to undo everything, to undo creation. That is why he created Lorkhan, to pretty much fuck up everything. Oh, and just another interesting point, if you watched our Thalmor Secret Plan theory video, it states that they also want to undo creation. But it is important to state that the degree of which they want to undo creation is different. The Thalmor, or at least the top echelon of Thalmor in theory, want to undo the creation of Nirn and Mundus so they can go back to being Etarda, immortal and everlasting. You can check that video out, link in the description. However, Sithis, from what we know, would want to undo more than that. He essentially wants nothing. Void, no universe, no oblivion, no Aetherius, definitely no Anoiel, just nothing. In summary, Sithis is the ultimate nihilism. He is the void, the nothing, the edgiest deity worshipped by the emo cult called the Dark Brotherhood. That is who Sithis is. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for sticking around and supporting our content. Like the video if you did enjoy it, and please throw down other lore questions you would like answered down in the comments below. If you want to catch us anywhere, Twitter is the place, as well as Twitch, the perfect places for some Q&A. My name is Scott, thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.